mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 6, Episode 4 of AMC's Better Call Saul, entitled Hit and Run. After the explosive episode we had last week, I think it was probably to be expected we have a little bit calmer of an episode this week, and we did get to see the playing out of the sabotaging of Howard's career that they started the ball rolling on, that we last saw. The last part of it that we saw was Jimmy having Huel copy Howard's keys and key fob. So we see that, and we also see the extent that Gus is willing to go to in order to find Lalo. But I want to start with the not the opening credits, but the scene prior to the opening credits, before I kind of talk about the I don't want to say the little bit that happened in this episode. A lot happened in this episode to move the plot along, but it just wasn't one of those ones where it's like, oh, holy shit, how crazy of an episode was this? But it opens with a scene with a couple riding their bikes through a neighborhood, and they drive past. They ride past an overly red house, carrying on this mundane conversation about how it's too red. And the one woman of the couple sounds like she wants to snitch to the homeowners association about it being too vibrant of a red. And that's another thing that just kind of irks me as a side note, is like, why are you so invested in what your neighbor's house looks like? It's like, okay, it's like, I don't know. What are you expecting to happen? Like, someone's going to come along and it's like, oh, wow, this is a beautiful house, but I'm not going to buy it because of that red house next door. Like, it's scaring people away or something. And I don't know. I can't wrap my head around that, but I think that's just a symptom of people caring too much about other people's fucking business, which is something that I can't wrap my head around. So that scene in general kind of irked me. But we see them get into the house, and there's like lots of monitors set up and security guys with guns and whatnot, and we don't really know what's going on. That's where it ends. We see a shot on one of the monitors of a house across the street, presumably with the address of 1213. And I wrote that down in my notes. Like, I bet this house is going to come back. And I love how they open this show that way, with like a whole elaborate scene that has an incredible amount of attention to detail and tells you a story, usually with very little to no dialogue. And then you just hit the opening credits. And you're like, okay, what was the point of anything I just saw? And then by the end of the episode, it all makes sense. They've always done that, and I really love when they do that. But this week, we spend most of our time in about 3 different places. We see the completion of at least this level of sabotaging Howard, but we see the completion of the prank that involved the keys and the key fob. We see Gus, like I said, the extent that Gus is willing to go to in order to make sure that he finds Lalo. And then we also see the results, I think the fallout of Jimmy's decision to assist Lalo in making bail and all of the sneaky shit that went into that. So I'm going to start with Kim and Jimmy's idea about Howard. So we see Howard pull up to presumably a therapist, and Jimmy walks up with the fake key and the key fob, and he takes the car, and smartly he does a few things that I think are that show a great level of planning here. Because who would think, like, you have this idea that he ends up playing out, but he brings like this orange cone, and I love the foresight of putting the cone in the parking spot so no one else will park in that spot. So when you bring the car back, you can put it back in the same spot. 1, it helps you identify the same spot in case you forgot, and then 2, it saves the spot so that you can put it there. So when Howard comes out, he won't realize that his car was moved. But Jimmy takes the car, puts the cone in the spot, and he picks up Wendy from Breaking Bad, who we remember from Breaking Bad, looking significantly less meth heady. And he picks up Wendy, and essentially the plan is, before I actually get to what the plan is, I also want to talk about Kim's side of the plan and her attention to detail and how she pre-planted her phone with pre-planned text input into it underneath the table, so that when she was meeting with Cliff and she was ready for the plan to go, all she had to do was kind of like blindly reach under the table and push, I guess, send on her phone to send the text, so that way she doesn't have to pull out her phone and look at it and text or something like that. And then moments later, if that happens, Cliff might be like, hey, you pulled your phone out, and then all of a sudden Howard came by and kicked the hooker out. Like, so lots of like the little things that go into making these plans work, these two took to heart. So she does that. She sends the text. Jimmy rolls up, And prior to this, when we see Jimmy walk up with the car keys, he's got like this bad spray tan and his hair is different. And I pieced together, not right away, but well before it was revealed, that his whole point was to look like Howard. And she sends go on the text. He pulls around. He kicks Wendy out and has a big fit or whatever. She has a big fit. And then he drives off. And of course, Cliff notices the Namaste license plate in the car. And he's like, oh, that's that Howard? She's like, oh, I don't know. It happened so fast. But also during this meeting, though, Kim inadvertently stumbled upon something that might send her back in a good direction. And I don't know about you guys, but I was concerned, and I still am, for Kim, but mainly revolving around her involvement with Jimmy. Like, is he going to get her into something that's going to get her in trouble? And then her, I don't even want to say willingness, her excitedness to hatch this plan against Howard made me feel like she was turning down a lot darker of a road. But now it seems like there could be hope for her to not go down that road, because Cliff wants to not offer her, but he seems interested at least in backing this idea for this team of independent pro bono lawyers. And I'm wondering if it's going to end up in a situation where she's going to have to choose between a life with Jimmy that involves doing shady shit and a life without Jimmy that involves doing pro bono work that is good for her soul. And if she meets that fork in the road, which direction is she going to go? Because either way could kind of result in her not in the reason why she doesn't appear in Breaking Bad, whether that's she leaves Jimmy completely and that's just it, or she stays with Jimmy, ends up doing shady shit and something happens to her. But I think that was a pretty interesting turn of events as far in the sabotaging Howard situation. I think it's going to need a little bit more escalating, although I did see in the preview for next week that it looks like Cliff does confront Howard to some degree, but I don't think that's enough to achieve the career ruining plan that these two seem to have for Howard. But I wonder if that'll probably play out, I think, probably as the season progresses. Like, it's just going to escalate, and that'll be something that we'll see kind of like reach its conclusion toward the end of the season. So word gets out about what Jimmy did for Lalo. You remember the whole bail scam and the different name and the fake family that came up there to testify on his behalf, all that good stuff. And word's gotten out about it, and it's had both a positive and a negative effect. On the negative side, everyone at the courthouse, he's like a pariah. Like the security don't fuck with him, the receptionists don't fuck with him. Nobody in there is really in the mood for Jimmy, and they look at it as like, okay, before you were always kind of a slime ball, but this time you went too far, and they've lost all respect for him. But does that really matter? Because on the pro side of things, his phone starts blowing up from a bunch of criminals who want to have a Salamanca lawyer represent them, and this is clearly like the first step into full-on Saul who helps Walter White in Breaking Bad. And he seems pretty pleased with this. Even though he gets kicked out of the nail salon, he ends up looking into buying the office that we know will become his office in Breaking Bad. So it's like he's in a situation where we could see the dissolving of his legitimate life, the little bit of it that there was. We could see the dissolving of that in the courthouse, or at least the start of the dissolving, and we start to see the growth of the Saul Goodman that we see in Better Call Saul in Breaking Bad. So we see that little bit there as well. The last little kind of, not last, there's one other, but another little side thing that we see going on is that Kim notices that there's some people following her. She confronts them. She asks if they're following her. They're like, what? She's like, well, I'll write your plate down and I'll call it in. And they drive off. She's been meeting with these pro bono customers at restaurants, and she returns at the El Camino diner. And the next time we see her, after she meets with some clients, Mike's there. And Mike decides that he's going to talk to her about what happened. And he explains to her, and I love how Mike explains things. It's never just like, here's what's happening. There's always like a little bit of Mike-ness to it. And what I mean by that is, you see, he says, I'll tell you what I can, or no, I'll answer any questions that I can. And then he says he's got people following her because of Lalo, and she's like, well, Lalo's dead. And he just he just stares at her micingly, like enough to say a stare that says no, he's not, without saying no, he's not. And then another thing he did that I liked was she eventually asked, like, who do you work for? And he says, I'd answer everything that I can. I said, I'd answer everything that I can, leaving out the implication of I can't answer that. And that's a small kind of thing that I pick up on this show. But that's again, a symptom of a show that treats you with respect and doesn't lay everything out for you. Like, yes, if he had said the full thing, would I have been like, oh, wow, they're treating me like an idiot? Of course not. But I just love the fact that just given Mike's character, given how he talks, given his face, his acting, he can go like, I answer every question I can. And then she can imply like, okay, well, I guess he can't answer that question. So I love how this show does that. And I just love, I love everything they do with Mike, man. He's incredible. And then lastly, the opening sequence and how it ties into the ending of the episode. So we see Gus go home, and we never really see like this kind of an intimate kind of look into Gus's personal life. Like we see him take off his chicken man clothes, he puts on his Gus Fring clothes, has a gun on his ankle, and then we see him go into the basement, and he moves a bookcase to the side of some Batman shit like it's crazy, and he like flips like it's like the fuse box kind of. No, it's not the, yeah, is it a fuse box? Yeah, the electrical box or whatever that you might have in your house. And he like flips a certain amount of switches, and then it opens up a secret door. And then we see him go down a hallway, which we then learn is actually underneath the street. And he crosses into the house across the street. And that's when we find out that Gus has set up that house across the street, and presumably the couple that we saw riding on their bikes are the people who live in that house, but they're just like, yeah, we're cool. We'll go live in the basement while you use our house for your command center. And that's where Gus is doing all his surveillance to look for Lalo. He's got monitors set up across the street. I mean, looking across the street at his house, and then presumably he's got monitors set up all over the city and following various people or in different locations looking for Lalo. And Mike kind of raises the question of whether or not Lalo's even actually alive. You know, he's like, no one's seen him. He's not showing up. So if he's alive, where is he? And Gus insists that he's alive, which we know that he is. So I expect next week for things to pick up a little bit more as far as like on the excitement scale of things, because we're gonna be moving a lot closer to the end of this first half of the season. But then also, I feel like this episode was really one that kind of helped transition from episode 3 to episode 5, where we could see a further escalation of what's happening to Howard, a further divergence between both Kim and Jimmy, where maybe Kim moves farther toward the good team and Jimmy moves farther toward the bad team. But most importantly, I think right now, now that we've kind of had this breather after episode 3, now we can kind of bring Lalo back and see where we're going to go with that. Because I don't think Lalo was in episode 3, was he? I mean, I'm sorry, episode 3. I don't know if Lalo was in that one. So largely absent Lalo since the whole situation with the fake body and whatnot. I think it's probably time to bring Lalo back, and I think this was a good time to take this breather this week and set up how they're going to close out this first half of the season. So looking forward to that. This is going to be a shorter video because, like I said, not a ton happened this week, but still a very enjoyable episode of Better Call Saul, and I'll see you guys next week for episode 5. Peace.